Introducing Erik Alfred Leslie Satie, 1866 to 1925. Pianist, composer, phenometrician, writer, playwright, artist, Dadaist, surrealist, filmmaker, wit, dandy, prankster, alcoholic, priest, recluse, friend of stray dogs, and collector of lost umbrellas. Included amongst his working partners were musicians, artists, poets, writers, dancers and filmmakers. Claude Debussy, Maurice Ravel, Francis Poulenc, Igor Stravinsky, Pablo Picasso, Man Ray, Ramon Casas, André Derain, Marcel Duchamp, Georges Braque, Constantin Brancusi, Guillaume Apollinaire, Patrice Contamine, Sergei Diaghilev, the Ballet Russe, Jean Cocteau, Leonard Massine, and Gertrude Stein. Satie is known to have loved only one girl, Suzanne Vallaudon, an artist who in 1892 painted his portrait. She also modelled herself for pictures by Renoir, Degas, and Toulouse-Lautrec. Alas, Suzanne Vallaudon broke Satie's heart, after which he lived alone as a recluse. Erik Alfred Leslie Satie was born in 1866. At the age of 6, his family life came to an abrupt and tragic end after his English-born mother suddenly died. His father, a translator in Paris, sent Erik and his younger brother Conrad to be looked after by their grandparents, who lived in the pretty seaside town of Harfleur, a Normandy port on the banks of the estuary of the Seine. The house has since been made into a museum commemorating Satie's life. In 1878, his grandmother died. Erik and Conrad returned to live with their father in Paris. Satie had taken organ lessons in Harfleur, and his father, instead of sending him to school, enrolled him at the Conservatoire de Paris. But 13-year-old Erik was unwilling or unable to fit in with the Conservatoire's academic surroundings. His tutors reported that he was gifted but indolent, worthless. One commented that he was the laziest student in the Conservatoire. But their opinion was wrong. Satie was gifted and loved music passionately. He was already publishing salon compositions created with his stepmother, a piano teacher. Satie refused to suppress his individualism. His first piano composition was 9 bars long, most of it a quote from a music hall song called Ma Normandie. His 5-year brush with the musical establishment left him dispirited, and at the age of 19 he enrolled in the army, a choice he immediately regretted, so much so that he purposely sat up all night in the cold, making himself so ill that he was discharged, and he returned to Paris to live with his father. One can't help but wonder whether he had any idea what he was going to do with his apparent failure of a life. Le Chat Noir. After a few months' recuperation from pneumonia, Erik left the family home and moved into lodgings, ready to embrace the exuberant Parisian lifestyle. In the 1880s, the city was a cauldron of misfits and anti-establishment art lovers, not least amongst them an outrageous oddball called Rodolphe Salis, a self-centered and rude theatrical impresario whose nightclub, Le Chat Noir, was doing a roaring trade in the bohemian Montmartre district of Paris. Despite its seedy origins, Le Chat Noir is credited with being the world's first cabaret bar. Guests would be met at the door by a Swiss guard, complete with halberd, bedecked from head to foot in gold, and charged with bringing painters and poets into the bar and keeping out infamous priests and the military. Inside, guests were entertained by piano music and stage shows. The club was an instant hit and was adopted as the watering hole of Les Hydropathes, a group of radical painters, poets and authors reputed to be afraid of water. Within 3 years, Le Chat Noir had outgrown its original premises and had moved by torchlight procession to more spacious surroundings at 84 Boulevard Rochechouart. In this spacious new setting, when an artist performed on stage, they received immediate feedback in the form of raucous boos or cheers. Le Chat Noir attracted artists, poets, actors, singers and musicians, and nourished developing avant-garde movements such as Le Salon des Arts Incohérents, the Salon of Incoherent Artists. The club even had its own journal promoting the arts. Bohemians and avant-garde artists flocked from all over the world to meet and to rub shoulders with their rich clients. Salis, as conférencier, introduced the acts and delighted the audience by bullying and insulting whichever of the customers he had decided to humiliate. To one new customer, who had obviously arrived with his wife, he exclaimed, "What have you done with your chick from yesterday?" And on another occasion, when the future King Edward VII arrived, he shouted to the crowds, "Well, look here, it looks as if the Prince of Wales is all pissed." The story goes that when Salis tried to humiliate the lowly, poverty-stricken Satie with a sarcastic question, "What is your profession?" the young, out-of-work Satie replied, "I am a gymnopedist." This is a word Salis is unlikely to have understood. A gymnopedist was a member of an obscure group of nude male dancers living in ancient Greece. Afterwards, Satie built on the witticism by calling himself phonometrician, meaning someone who measures and writes down sounds. Satie's jokes, the titles for his musical pieces, were all laced with invention, seriousness and passion, qualities that he developed into an ever more subtle view of the world. A little later, Satie was employed as a pianist at Le Chat Noir between 1888 and 1891. Salis famously underpaid his staff and treated the performers badly. Satie said he found the work degrading, but at least his individualism was being noticed, and for the first time his strange musical compositions were being heard and appreciated by serious musicians such as Debussy and Ravel, who both borrowed his musical inventions for their own compositions. Satie's artistic life had at last been launched, and he had become lifelong friends with Debussy and the romantic poet Patrice Contamine. Les Trois Gymnopédies and Les Gnossiennes. Satie published his first masterpieces, Les Trois Gymnopédies and Les Gnossiennes, whilst he was working at Le Chat Noir. The first edition of Les Gymnopédies was completed in April 1888 and included the poetry of Satie's friend, Patrice Contamine. Oblique et coupant l'ombre, un torrent éclatant ruisselait en flotte d'or sur la dalle polie, où les atomes d'ombre au feu se miroitant meulaient leur sarabande à la gymnopédie. Slanting and shadow-cutting, a bursting stream trickled in gusts of gold on the shiny flagstone, where the amber atoms in the fire gleaming mingled their sarabande with the gymnopedia. The melodies of the pieces used deliberate but mild dissonances against the harmony, producing a piquant, melancholy effect that matches Satie's instructions, which are to play each piece painfully, sadly, or gravely. The pieces have always attracted dancers. In 1922, Constantin Brancouche designed costumes especially for a performance of Les Trois Gymnopédies. The Gnossiennes are said to have been inspired by an ancient Javanese instrument called the gamelan, which Satie heard at the Paris Exposition of 1889. Satie's Gnossiennes sound exotic because the scales they use are actually built on tritones, which to Western ears are highly dissonant.